8, Unit 9, Lesson 4, Part 1. We're going to go over 0 and negative exponents, looking at why the rules are what they are. First, here's a quotient, 5 cubed divided by 5 cubed. If we use the quotient of powers property, we would do 5 to the 3 minus 3. That gives us 5 to the 0. Same, 6 squared over 6 squared, we get 6 to the 0 using the quotient property. Quotient of powers property. Negative 3 to the 4th divided by negative 3 to the 4th would give us negative 3 to the 0. And negative 4 to the 5th divided by negative 4 to the 5th gives us negative 4 to the 0. Now we also need to couple this with something else we know about fractions. If you just evaluate each of these individually, 5 cubed over 5 cubed is 125 over 125. That's just 1. 6 squared over 6 squared is 36 over 36. That's just 1. Negative 3 to the 4th over negative 3 to the 4th is 81 over 81. Still equal to 1. Negative 4 to the 5th over negative 4 to the 5th is negative 1024 over negative 1024. Also equal to 1. So there seems to be some sort of relationship here. And that's actually the first property about 0 exponents. But let's look at it another way. By the way, what we should see here is that a number to the 0 power will always equal 1. Let's look at it another way though. Let's take 3 to the 0 times 3 to the 4th. We just get 3 to the 4th when we add the exponents. 8 squared times 8 to the 0 would just be 8 squared. If we do negative 2 cubed times negative 2 to the 0, we'd get negative 2 cubed. And negative 1/3 to the 0 times negative 1/3 to the 5th, we just get negative 1/3 to the 5th. And you should notice that if we ignore the 1 to the 0 power, we get out what we put in. Now, you need to think for a moment, what causes this? What causes, or what number is it that when you multiply by it, it gives you the same thing back that you put in? A number times 2 equals, well, the same number that you put in. What would that number have to be? Well, it would have to be 1. Anytime you multiply by a number and get the same thing you started with, that number also has to be 1. So that's two different reasons that this number is 1. Okay, let's look at what happens here with these exponents that are negative. We haven't seen those before. But let's just apply a rule we already know. We should be able to add the exponents together. And in this case, we get 5 to the 0. Same with 6 squared times 6 to the negative 2. We get 6 to the 0. And the same thing happens on these other two. Now, on this, remember that all of those, because they're to the 0 power, are just going to equal 1. So let's think for a moment. If two numbers multiply to equal 1, then what's true about them? Well, consider these three examples. 2 times what number equals 1? All right, we learned this back in 7th grade. Actually, we learned it probably in 5th grade, but again in 7th. Definitely in 7th grade. 2 times a half will give you 1. 5/6 times 6/5 will give you 1 because you get 30/30ths. X times 1 over x will give you 1. So, it looks like when you're dealing with a negative exponent, like x to the negative 1, that's the same thing as 1 over x. Negative exponents cause reciprocals. Okay, so let's look at the overall rule for this, the notes. X over x squared. If we apply the quotient rule, the quotient of powers rule, we get x to the negative 1. If we do the fraction rule, then we get x over x squared, which is 1 over x. Okay, explaining the rule. A negative exponent is the same as dividing by the power with a positive exponent. Okay, here's the rule written a couple of ways. X to the negative a, we could change it to 1 over x to the positive a. And if you have a negative exponent on bottom, you can just move it to the top of a fraction and it gets rid of the negative exponent. And this is your negative exponent rule. Okay, next one. If we apply the quotient of powers rule, we'd get 3 to the 0 times x to the 0 times y to the 0, which you should know equals 1. If we apply the fraction rules of just reducing, everything reduces and you're left with 1. So here, things to the 0 power equal 1. Any base, except 0, raised to the 0 power will equal 1. So x to the 0 is 1 as long as x isn't 0. This is called the zero exponent rule. Thanks for watching.